and welcome back to Beyond the Apex. In today's episode we're going to be talking about the Dutch Grand Prix. So we're back at Zandvoort, which is quite exciting. I mean, I love Zandvoort ever since I've been. It's just, it's an exciting track and you get a lot of exciting racing. But it's great to be back filming the podcast because we've had a bit of time off obviously, but now we're back for second year uni.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
the stress.
But you know, here we are. Yeah. So let's get into it, to be honest. So Red Bull, let's start off.
Oh my god, so Max was put through it today, today, we're going to call it today.
Yeah.
He was put through it. Obviously they didn't put him on the right strategy, but it was still done as masterclass.
Yeah. No, it was.
Yeah. I mean, the start was the main bit for me. It was the fact that he was put on the wrong strategy.
Yeah.
They left him out for one more lap. Checo pitted straight away. He was then 14 seconds behind Checo after the first stops and managed to crawl it back in about 10 laps. Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Yeah, it does show the difference between 1 and 2 drivers.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I did read a thing that one of the F1 journalists put out. A little bit of technical info. So basically that Red Bull is designed to have a lot of front downforce, but it's easy to drive when the front downforce is taken off. Right. So Checo runs with a lot of downforce off, front downforce off, so that it's easier to drive. But apparently Max just doesn't do that and just learns to drive the car how it is. So he is driving the car how it's supposed to be driven, and that's how he gets that lap time out, because he was 4 seconds a lap quicker at points. It was unreal driving from Max.
Yeah.
But obviously Checo, disappointing. The 2 mistakes he made at the end meant that he was off the podium, and he really should have been on the podium in that race.
Yeah, I mean for Red Bull as well, in terms of constructors, they kind of want...
They've won anyway, but obviously to get there, because I think their aim is around 1,000 points. If they can get 1,000 points, they want that record. But Checo is going to let them down, because obviously little mistakes like this are going to lead to... I mean, what, he got 4th or 5th in the end? Because obviously he got a 5-second penalty.
Yeah.
It's just a shame from him, and obviously with Ricardo looming in the wings, we'll talk about that later, but with Ricardo, Lawson maybe, Yuki looming in the wings, his seat's definitely at risk for 2025.
It is definitely, I think we can all see that as well. We've got some really fast people coming up, you know, that have got the possibility, but obviously Checo, really not looking good at the moment, is it? Not looking good, but we'll move on to Ferrari.
Oh, it's just a very poor result.
Yeah, I mean, it's not what we want to see from them. I mean,
I mean, so obviously Charles had floor damage from lap 1, incident with Piastri, meant that obviously we saw Lawson overtaking Charles Leclerc on his first race, which we'll go back into later, but it just meant that he had to retire because there was no point running that car. No. And then Sainz had great defending against Hamilton at the end, but in the end it just wasn't a good result again for where they should be aiming. They're aiming for second in the constructors.
Yeah, it's not.
And at the moment they are not doing enough to conquer Mercedes.
Nowhere near, absolutely. And on that
on that note,
on to Mercedes. I mean,
that strategy at the start was absolutely shocking, because obviously it was a mad start. I think everyone could see at the start they needed to pit, but some teams ran it long. Red Bull ran it a little bit long. Mercedes definitely ran it long, along with McLaren. But Mercedes did it weird. They ran longer than everyone else, apart from Albon with Williams, which we'll go into as well. But they ran really long at the start and then pitted onto Inters again. So there was no point. I don't know why they didn't just leave them out until it dried up, because that's what Williams did, and they succeeded. They were running 16th and 18th at one point, and that eventually led to them not being on the podium.
No.
But I mean, it was a fantastic qualifying from George. Obviously P3 on the grid, but it just was not a good weekend.
Not a positive result from them at all. No. Fair enough. Right, we'll go on to Alpine. I mean, I feel like we've just gone like this.
Yeah, we've gone up, down,
good, bad.
And now we're up.
So it was a good result from them. I mean,
absolutely, obviously.
Gasly on the podium.
Unreal. I mean, it was mainly strategy. But he drove that race. So obviously Joe was in a better position than Gasly. But obviously didn't get there in the end. But I mean, great result for the team, keeping that podium, and now he is definitely showing that he is vying for Ocon's first driver spot in that team.
100%, yeah. But then quali pace.
No, it's not there.
It was, like you said, it was very much down to strategy in the race. Obviously, it was a good drive, but...
Yeah, I mean, he did luck out very much by strategy. It was whoever pitted first. I mean, we could have had anyone leading that race at the start, because it was whoever pitted on lap 1 had the better sort of tyres, obviously switched on to the Inters when it was chucking it down with rain. Anyone could have been leading that race, and Gasly got up into the podium. So
just one of those things.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go on to McLaren now. Right, so yes, McLaren.
It was just poor strategy again.
Yeah, I feel like we've said this a lot for this weekend in terms of strategy. Like we said, actually we did say at the start, it really was dependent on how you acted in terms of the rain and like what you did in that situation. So obviously McLaren, I mean, it was poor.
It was very poor. I mean, it was confusing as well because obviously we had Sochi 2021 where Lando didn't box for instance, and I've listened to it. It gives. I've never watched it back. It just gives me nightmares. But yeah, in those first laps, Lando was begging to come to the pits, and the team were telling him that the slicks were quicker than the inters. So it was a complete McLaren screw up.
Yeah.
It was still quite a good recovery. I don't know how we still got double points.
Yeah.
But yeah, it could have easily been a podium. But the quality pace is there in the car.
Yeah.
It's good to see McLaren do have the pace that kind of Britain and Hungary have kind of shown.
Yeah.
But yeah, it could have been a massive result, and we didn't live up to the expectations, which is unfortunate.
But not a bad weekend.
It wasn't at all.
No. Okay, so Alfa Romeo.
I mean, it could have been such a big race for them.
Yeah.
It could have been such a big race. I mean, Zhou was running P2, I think, at some point. He could have been leading the race.
Yeah.
But yeah, eventually both out the points, and that's just Alfa Romeo this season, isn't it?
Yeah. It's
And it's a shame to see because obviously they're going to become Sauber next year, and we've said this at every podcast, I feel like, but they're just not living up to expectations.
No.
And there's been a lot of rumours around Zhou's seat. Apparently he hasn't got the sponsorship anymore. That I think he brought around £30 million, which was huge for the team, is what they needed. And apparently he's not bringing that anymore, which means that there's a couple of people vying for his seat.
Yeah, we all know what that means, don't we?
Yes, good old silly season coming again, but obviously we've got Drugovic vying for that seat.
Yeah.
We've got Mick Schumacher's vying for that seat, Alex Palou in IndyCar, but we've also got a certain F2 driver who we may have spoken about a couple of times this season already. This is the time, Teo.
Honest to God, we need a little thing to
Teo Pourchaire's weekend. But actually, it wasn't a good weekend for Teo. However, it also wasn't a good weekend for the top 6 in the championship.
I watched that race, apparently.
Yes.
I did actually.
Yeah, you actually watched one.
I did.
And it was mayhem. The feature race was, so firstly, the sprint race was a washout. Teo was on pole for it, had car issues, ran last, but they actually didn't give out any points because it was just rained off. Then we had the feature race, which was absolute chaos. Vesti span off at the start. Teo had great pace actually, was going to lead the race at one point and then just binned it on his outlap on his new tyres, which was awful. But then Vesti came out and then both his rear tyres came off. So it was a majorly weird feature race, but luckily for me, he didn't lose any points to Vesti, which was, thank God,
good for the championship.
Very good for the championship, obviously. I think he's about 12 points off now going into Monza, so hopefully, fingers crossed, he has a good weekend, doesn't do a Teo, and hopefully this championship is still on because he needs to refocus himself after this weekend. But so obviously Teo's in line, hopefully for that Sauber seat next year. It's a possibility. I'm keeping everything crossed. But
hopefully when we're doing this podcast, in the future, we'll be talking about Teo.
Yes, oh my God, yeah, next year when we've got a couple of changes to the podcast, but hopefully we will be talking about Teo Pourchaire in that Sauber seat. Fingers crossed.
Definitely.
On to Aston Martin.
On to Aston Martin. Actually, on the note though about the podcast as well, we will probably say more at the end.
Yes.
But there are a few changes, but we are going to continue the podcast.
We are going to continue the podcast, but with both of our schedules now, we've both got stuff going on in motorsport. Both got obviously a uni degree to do, so we are going to alter it a little bit. Still going to be coming to you, and it's going to be more diverse than ever.
Yes. More than just F1.
More than just F1. So we'll talk about it at the end.
Cool. We'll talk about Aston Martin now.
Yeah, on to Aston Martin.
Yeah. So.
Great to see Alonso back on the podium. Obviously, the quali pace still isn't back in that car. They brought upgrades this weekend, but the quali pace still isn't where Alonso can fight for pole like he was early in the season.
No, we did see that a lot, especially at the start of the season. But I feel like that's just dropped off a little bit.
It really has. I think it's more. It hasn't dropped off, even though it has, but it hasn't dropped off more than other teams have just been bringing the thing to bringing their game. But yeah, I mean, it's great to see him on the podium. Obviously, great strategy from Aston Martin. Yeah, it was great to see him on the podium again. It's always nice to see Fernando on the podium. He's always really happy just to be back in Formula 1 in a competitive car.
Definitely.
And he is absolutely performing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Okay, we'll move on to Haas now.
Yeah, so they were doing well. For once again, it's every single weekend with Haas. They just don't have the race pace in that car. The tyres are overheating way too much. They degrade like you wouldn't believe, and they just always drop out the points. And it was the same this weekend with Kevin.
Yeah. They're just not a lot more.
It's a shame to see. But what I was confused about is that we got the news this weekend that Hulkenberg and Magnussen have been re-signed for next year.
I didn't see that. Yeah.
So I really don't understand that with Hulkenberg absolutely outperforming Kevin.
No.
Why they wouldn't take a risk on someone or go for someone like Alex Palou in IndyCar, who's absolutely smashing it right now. Why they wouldn't go for a Mick Schumacher, get him back in the car because he knows the car. Because obviously Kevin has not been performing this year. We cannot overstate that more. He has not been performing. He has not been getting the pace that Hulkenberg's been getting out of the car. So it's weird to see them both re-signed. I wasn't expecting it.
No, it was definitely City season.
But hopefully City season is in the back half of this year after the season finishes.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
We get that beautiful F1 graphic saying turbo share signed for 2024. I will be insufferable next year.
Yes.
Absolutely insufferable. But on to AlphaTauri.
I mean,
we're talking about silly season.
Talking about silly season. Oh my gosh! So actually, I had no service, so I didn't know this was happening.
Yeah.
So when I watched the race, I came to Sunday, watched the race, saw Lawson, and I was like,
what's happening there? Yeah.
I was like,
It was mayhem.
Yeah.
So obviously, if you didn't watch the race, in practice 2, Ricciardo had a crash, hurt his wrist. I think a lot. He fractures one of his. I think it's metacarpal in his wrist.
Yeah.
But he's out. Hopefully, he gets better very soon. But it gave the opportunity. Lawson was at the track, gave the opportunity to get him in the car, and he performed.
He did.
He really performed. Obviously, the quali, that was his first session, so we weren't expecting anything from him.
No.
But in the race, he did excellently.
Mm-hmm.
He finished above Yuki. He was fighting with Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari at one point. Made a move which was gutsy as hell going into, I think it was turn 12, into that stadium section. But and obviously he finished above Yuki because of an incident on the final lap. But still in the conditions, the hardest conditions, he performed.
Definitely, and I think looking at that in comparison to Danny Rick as well, it's interesting to see, because we've obviously Danny Rick it's been quite a risk for AlphaTauri to bring him back into the car.
100%.
And we wanted to see him outperform Yuki to a certain extent, because obviously, you know,
he needs to.
He needs to be able to have the seat, because that's the reason why they didn't have De Vries in, because
De Vries was doing badly.
Yeah.
But now with Lawson, it's going to be really interesting to see who gets that seat for 2024.
Definitely. That is going to be one to watch. Silly season.
I feel like silly season is just going to be winter. It's going to be the silly season of winter this year, because obviously we've still got a Williams seat to decide. We've still got an Alfa Romeo seat, 2 AlphaTauri seats to decide. So it's going to be very, very interesting.
Absolutely, it is. Okay, so we'll talk about Williams now. Finally.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, Alex
Albon, just weekend in, weekend out, is just performing in that Williams.
Yeah.
And P4 on the grid, I think he got in the end.
Yeah.
In that Williams that is only good in the straights, is a boat in the corners, and Zandvoort's mostly corners. I don't understand how he got that result out. And obviously, he got P8 in the end. Even with that strategy, obviously, they just kept him out.
Yeah. Still
unreal.
Good points, isn't it? So
absolutely.
Fantastic, to be honest. But Logan.
I mean, obviously he got into Q3.
Yeah.
However, the race, he did have a hydraulic failure in the race, which is fair enough. That's not his problem, and he wasn't doing the greatest in the race. Again, I think we're saying that with Logan every weekend. But in practice, again, he had a stupid crash, and I know he's a rookie, but there is a lot of pressure on that seat.
Oh, 100%. I mean, we've seen it with Nick De Vries. So
absolutely.
That says it all.
Anything can happen, and I think Logan is going to be vying for his seat in the next few races, because Williams they invested so much money into Logan, and firstly they're not getting the merchandise sales out of him in the US. The US just aren't really taking to him like they would a Jack Crawford, for instance. I think Logan just doesn't, his personality doesn't really come out.
Yeah.
So they're not getting that, which they were kind of banking on. And secondly, he's just not performing in the car.
No.
So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with him.
Once again, silly season.
Silly season is going to be brilliant.
Yeah.
And luckily with our new format, should we go on to our new format?
Yes, we'll go on to our new format. Okay, are we going to announce it?
Yeah, let's announce it.
Yeah. So to end off the podcast, we'll talk about, we're going to do, oh my gosh, how do I...
So basically we're going to be doing them every month. So it's going to be a monthly podcast from now on.
Yep.
So we'll start them in January, because obviously the Formula E season starts in January. So that will be mainly what we cover in January.
Yeah.
And then we're just going to be doing them every month. But we're going to cover so many different types of motorsport.
Cover obviously Formula 1.
Yes.
Obviously there's probably more to this band, but we're going to do obviously Formula E, what was it?
IndyCar,
Formula 2 obviously, and
yeah.
then BTCC, and maybe some other what's it called? Categories as well, because
we can.
So much
there's so much in motorsport. And
but like Sam said earlier, obviously we've both got a lot going on. We've both got degrees to do. We've both got motorsport stuff that's coming up. So
interesting.
So we're going to do it monthly, but obviously it would really mean that the podcast is longer.
Yes, probably be around an hour, probably.
Yeah, definitely. But we'll make sure that there are splits in it as well.
Yes,
Like you can go to different parts if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so you can just watch it for one category, definitely.
Yeah.
So that's the plan. But obviously we're going to stick at it because I think it's a really good thing.
Oh yeah. I love doing the podcast.
Yeah,
it's our little thing.
It's great. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So and that's the podcast.
Yeah, that's it. That's it for today. So stay tuned for next week. I'm going to say next week, which is next minute.
Yeah, next minute. We might be in the same clothes.
No, never.
No.
We do have other clothes, don't worry. Yeah. So yeah, we'll speak to you later. Thanks for watching.